It was the final day of the Island County Fair on Whidbey Island in Washington State on Saturday 16th August 2003. Local people flooded to the picturesque island, 30 miles north of Seattle, to take part in a tradition that spanned all the way back to the early 20th century. The sun was shining, and this year's fair had been a huge success so far. No one could have predicted the tragedy that would unfold, leaving children traumatized, fairgoers in shock, and a family business in tatters. This incident happened a while ago now, but it took me aback with just how a lovely and wholesome day can so quickly turn brutal and horrific. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that I make videos weekly, so if you want to see my next one, please drop the video a like and subscribe if you are new. It really helps me out. Thank you. This is a true story, with information gathered from published online sources and materials. While I do not condone the events that occurred, I urge everyone to remain alert and cautious in situations that could pose a danger. The Island County Fair first sprung up in 1912 in South Whidbey, initially as a way for people to display the fruits of their farm in competitive exhibits in order to be eligible to join the hunt for a single gold coin dropped by the town banker. By 2003, the fair had grown considerably and now had various attractions for the whole family. Revelers could enjoy food stands, camping facilities, concerts, and all the fun of the fair, including some thrilling roller coasters. On that sunny Saturday, the screams that could be heard across the fair were unfortunately not just due to the excitement of the rides. Paradise Amusements had signed a contract to provide the fairground rides at the Island County Fair in the year 2000 for the next 5 years. Based in Idaho, this traveling fair was a family-run business that had been working across America for 40 years, supplying generations of families with happy memories and all the candy floss they could eat. Doug McKay, aged 40, had taken over from his father some years prior and was known as a man who took great pride in his business and worked hard to keep the carnival safe and colourful. He worked alongside his wife Sherry and was described by his crew and peers as a tough boss and a masterful mechanic. One of the best loved rides at the fair was the Superloop 2. It was a single track and train ride that sped round in a donut shape, hurtling forward at dramatic speeds and turning riders upside down several times. At 2 p.m, Doug McKay was observing the Superloop 2 and carrying out routine surveillance work. The Superloop has several different safety features in order to prevent any accidents occurring. There was an emergency power cut-off button and a dead man's operator chair that detects the absence of an operator and immediately shuts down the ride. There are also anti-air double lock harnesses with a secondary precaution belt. Everything was regularly inspected and seemed to be in good working order. But routine maintenance is a normal part of carnival life, and Doug was generally a cautious and conscientious owner. While looking over the ride, 12-year-old Dylan and his friends stood eagerly in the queue. After checking they met the height restrictions of 1.22 meters, Dylan had travelled from nearby Clinton with his mother and father and was equal parts excited and nervous to embark on what the ride operator had promised would be the ride of his life. Saturday was the busiest day at the fair, and he had spent it so far eating corn dogs and enjoying the other popular rides, such as the tilt-a-whirl and the paratrooper. He told himself what any thrill seeker tells themselves while in the queue for a roller coaster, that it was perfectly safe and promised to be a lot of fun. The boys pushed forward, eager to be at the front of the cart, where they could feel the exhilarating effects of the speedy loop-de-loop. At that point, he thought that the worst that could happen would be a slightly upset stomach due to all the junk food he had consumed, and the inevitable drop he would feel as he spun around the ride. With the boys locked in, the ride began, and it was just as much fun as the operator had promised. Meanwhile, back on the ground, Doug McKay noticed that part of the ride could do with some lubrication. An easy job, very quick, and one that Doug thought could be done safely, even with the ride in motion. He stepped forward to look closer, and it was that mistake that would set the wheels in motion for what would become the most tragic blight in Whidbey Island County Fair since its inception. Theoretically, Doug was too far away from the track to be in any danger, but as soon as the train sped through one of its loops, the force of the air whipped his hair up, causing it to be caught in the coaster wheels. He was dragged up into the air with the coaster, to the horror of the boys at the front of the cart, who watched the gruesome scene unfold. While Doug was being mercilessly dragged by the coaster 30-40 feet up into the air, he hit a piece of metalwork that was poking out, cutting his throat. The cut wasn't fatal, but it was deep enough to spray young Dylan Volz and his friends with his blood. Their screams turned from those of young boys enjoying a fairground ride to blood-curdling shrieks of pure horror. The unyielding coaster, unaffected by the weight of Doug's body, dragged him around the loop, the G-force eventually tearing his scalp from his head and flinging him through the air. It's reported that the blood from his throat sprayed a group of children waiting in line for another ride, those who had witnessed the tragic and gruesome spectacle. By this point were alerting other people in the crowd, whipping up a panicked frenzy. One individual, who already happened to be filming, turned his camera towards the scene. Doug then crashed into a metal beam, which bent his body in half with its force, before finally hitting the ground with such an impact that one account recalls that guts, brains and blood sprayed all over a bunch of children who were unfortunate to be walking by. Naturally in shock, the operator stopped the ride immediately, and the authorities were informed. The fire and police departments, usually on standby at the fair for any accidents or incidents, attended immediately and herded up the disturbed fairground goers, who were questioned at length, including poor Dylan Volz, who was still covered in Doug's blood. Dylan told police officers that he could see Doug on the ground while he was on the ride, dodging the cart in order to periodically spray lubricant on the tracks. He said it looked to him as if he was caught by his arm. "I saw him get pulled up and dropped," he told reporters at the scene. "I just put my hands over my eyes and walked away. No one should have to see that." Dylan's father, Robert Volz, said the police kept the children for up to an hour for questioning, but that him and his wife led their son away before the end, in order to clean him up. There was some controversy after the event that the police didn't give the children time to clean off Doug's blood. Meanwhile, the crew member operating the Superloop at the time of Doug's tragic death told the person staffing a nearby booth that he had just watched his best friend die. After the harrowing event, an eerie silence swept the fair. However, less than an hour later, the crew decided the show must go on, and the rides reopened, all except the Superloop 2. Doug's wife later said that she had promised her husband that if anything ever happened to him, she would keep the show going, and she was true to her word. Despite gathering information from those interviews and other witnesses, the Island County Sheriff's Office couldn't establish a definitive explanation for McKay's death, although initial reports suggested the possibility of McKay's arm or hair becoming entangled in the ride. It was impossible to reach a solid conclusion due to the state of Doug's body. Although there was nothing that could be done for McKay after the incident, volunteers promptly provided trauma counselling to witnesses. Following the accident, one newspaper photographed the faced threats from fair security, while another was instructed by official personnel to surrender her camera and film. Although what happened is truly shocking, and keeping in mind how difficult it must have been for his wife, family and friends, I think it's very commendable how they all pulled together to keep the show on the road. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.